I went to work at the Savannah Morning News as a galley boy, put in 2 years there, and that was in the early 40s, 41, 42, and finally went back to high school and finished my sophomore year, and I was going to be drafted during that year. So I took the Air Force cadet exam with the senior class, and 2 was passed it, 1 senior and 1 sophomore with this particular group. I went in the service the summer after that, which was July 1943, and went to basic training in Miami Beach. From Miami Beach, we went all the way across country to La Grande, Oregon, to college, the Eastern Oregon College of Education.
And you went across country by train?
By train, 7 days. We stopped along the way. The train could have had 30 or 40 cars leaving Miami Beach, but the time it got all the way across country, dropping cars off in the different colleges, that there was one group left when we got off in La Grande, Oregon. One group was left, and it was going to one of the universities in the state of Washington.
So these were all GIs?
All GIs.
Group train?
It was all cadets.
Ah.
Everybody that had been accepted into the Air Force cadet program.
And what did you do in Oregon?
Went to college, studied things like math, English, literature, math, and so forth, things that we would need to be up on flying as a pilot, co-pilot, or a bombardier navigator. But along the line, when we went, and after the 3 months of that, we went down to Santa Ana, California, where we went through tests to determine whether you would be a bombardier, radio operator, bombardier, navigator, or pilot or co-pilot. So what these tests would tell them something that you were more applicable to go to one of these different types of training. Well, it turned out that all my group was been classified where they were going, and I hung around for several weeks later. For what reason, I have no idea. I thought possibly could have been, maybe they found something medical, but nothing ever showed up as far as I knew. And so I was washed out from there, and I had to make a decision whether I wanted to go to an armament school, to aircraft mechanics school, or to a radio operating school. And I picked to go to the aircraft mechanic, and that I ended up leaving sometime in late December from Los Angeles, or from the Santa Ana. We left that area by a troop train, and ended up on New Year's Day in Amarillo, Texas.
Oh, wow.
We spent approximately 5-6 months at Amarillo. We knew every nut and bolt. You could pick it up and feel it and tell what size it was and so forth. So after very good training in aircraft mechanics, we were shipped to Florida, to Buckingham Army Airfield outside of Fort Myers. And there we went to gunnery school. And after about 3 months of gunnery school, we found our way going on a delay en route, which is very simple for me, going from Florida to Savannah, where my home was, spending 3 or 4 days, and then catching a regular passenger train on to the Boston area, where I went to Westover Field and found out where I was assigned to a crew there.
Had you been specializing in B-24s, or did you learn all different types of airplanes?
All different types. The B-24, that was a new one there, but we got together and milled as a crew. Pilot, co-pilot, navigator. Then I was a flight engineer. Bill Dollar was the radio operator. We had a nose gunner named, he was Joe Fisher, a tail gunner named Henry Newman, two waist gunners named Smitty. Smith was his last name, of course. Then the other gunner was, oh gosh, Silliman. He called himself Silliman the Great. And he was from Ely, Nevada. Smith was from Birmingham, Alabama. Bill Dollar was from Cairo, Georgia. Newman was from Detroit. The pilot was from New York. His name was Warren G. Harding. He was from New York. The co-pilot, oh gosh, been a long time. I know I got his name written down somewhere, but he was from Kentucky. And we had a group of them all over the country, really. All the different people were from different parts of the country. Only two from like a particular state, and that was Bill Dollar and myself from the state of Georgia. And we flew as and went back to Charleston. I went from Westover Field back to Charleston, South Carolina, and trained where I was training. We were training in B-24s the whole time. We never flew in another airplane during the war other than a B-24. So everything we were learning was getting us ready to fly missions once we arrived in the United Kingdom.
So you stayed together with this one group then?
One group, yes.
Training.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, interesting.
And that was like a 3 to 4 months training. And we were finally shipped out of there on a troop train with quite a few guys going. And we ended up in Mitchell Field, New York. And we were assigned to a brand new B-24. And after flying around New York for maybe a week, getting used to the new airplane, we flew out of Mitchell Field for Bangor, Maine, and spent the night, then left, and the next day we flew into Goose Bay, Labrador. We spent a good week or more, it seems, there. We were snowed in. Also, I think there was a holdup somewhere along at the bases that we would have to fly into on the flying the northern road to England. And we, after leaving Goose Bay, we flew out one night. It was dark most of the time in January. So we flew into Iceland. And we spent a night there. Spent a day or a night, whatever it was. And then we took off. It was a snowstorm or something coming in, so they got us out quickly. And so we flew on into England, and we arrived in Valley, Wales the next afternoon. And after going through all this cold weather, we arrived in Valley, Wales, and the weather was absolutely beautiful. It looked like a spring day. We took off our heavy flying equipment and more or less laid down in the grass because it was so nice and warm. But after we were waiting, the crew waited there, and finally the pilot, co-pilot, and the flight engineer and the radio operator, we stayed behind because we could not fly the airplane out because it snowed the next morning after our arrival, and it took us a week to get the place cleared off by hand for the airplanes to fly out.
What year was this?
This was just the beginning of 44. No, excuse me, 45. 43 birthday, I was in La Grande, Oregon in college. Then 44th birthday, I was in Charleston. And then the year when we went to New York, we arrived between Christmas and New Year's, and we flew out a week or two into to 45, and that's when we took the airplane over the northern road to Valley, Wales. And as I said, it was a beautiful weather when we arrived there. But then it snowed the next day, and so we couldn't get the airplane out.
But that wasn't your permanent assignment.
No.
Were there other planes there?
Yes, there was quite a few, and I mean we were all stationed out distances and so forth as we were flying from Iceland to Valley, Wales. And then when we finally got out of Valley, Wales, we flew short distance into Liverpool. There was an air depot there. So we turned the airplane over to the depot, and they in turn got it ready for combat.
Oh.
Things that they knew overseas that the builders here in the States didn't know.
Oh.
We never saw that airplane again.
Oh,
So,
you didn't keep that airplane?
didn't keep that airplane.
Oh.
We were assigned to, the first number of missions, half a dozen or so, we were assigned to different airplanes since we were a new crew. And then finally after that we got assigned number 792. I think it was probably an L, a B-24L.
792, is that the serial
792 was the number of the plane. It was probably part of the serial, last four numbers of the serial number.
How long was it before you actually went on your first mission?
Well, probably it wasn't until really February. We got there middle of January, and then we had to fly, had to get used to and practice into how we came in for landings, how we took off, how we formed above England in our different group formations, squadron groups, and how we would head out across the channel.
Mm-hmm.
So all that had to be taken place into February, and finally we were assigned our first mission, and the second mission, and the third mission came 1, 2, 3 in 3 days.
Do you remember your first mission?
Yes, my first mission I remember very well, because it was the first time that we saw flak live. And this stuff is bursting out in front of us, and we headed into it. And I thought it was, gosh, this is, unique here, seeing this. And then all of a sudden I realized that it could kill me. So I took my twin 50, the turret. I I manned the top turret on a B-24, as well as my flight engineer duties. And so I pulled the 250 calibers in that turret down as low as they would go, and blocking my head mainly, for thinking if a piece was coming my way, maybe the guns might deflect it or something.
Wow.
But that was the first one, and we were around at a low altitude. We were bombing some rail yards, I think, in Schaffenburg. And we found out that we were in a mountainous terrain. We were low. I did see an airplane off our wing get hit and went down, and that also scared us a little bit. But then nothing particularly. The missions were always based on something like that. What you might run into. We did not run into many fighters. The German Air Force was annihilated. Our fighters just shot them all out of the air.
Did you usually have fighter cover?
Oh yes, always had fighter cover, mainly P-51s.
Okay.
And did see on one of the missions, I saw the 262, the first German jet. And it was flying high above the formation, I think trying to figure out whether it should try to come through the formation. Well, the P-51s got after him, and they stayed with him pretty well on the climb. But the minute he turned and went down, they lost him. And he was probably was going home because he was out of gas, probably, because they had such a short air time with gasoline, with the fuel aboard. But I flew somewhere around 18 missions. The biggest problem we had once was, the big problem, was I had pulled away from my heated suit was plugged in on the flight deck where I usually was. And so I pulled away too far and my heated suit caught on fire. I was able...
Caught on fire?
Caught on fire. It was shot, the wires coming to it, it shorted out and it caught the suit on fire. So I was able to get it out, but then my problem was we are on our way to a target and the oil dumps in Magdeburg. And we were on the way there and there were fighters in the area. First of all, I got my blanket out on a kit we had. We also had an electric muff, which I turned inside out, plugged it in and put it inside my jacket. Then I covered up with the blanket we had. And then, but shortly after that, fighters were in the area. So I told Bill Dollar, the radio operator, I said, Bill, I can't get in that turret, I'm afraid I'm freeze to death. So he said, okay, he would get in it. And after I got him hooked up with all his radio equipment, we were going along and leaving the target, we got hit with some flak, and he came, dropped out of his turret into my lap. And I thought when I got him situated, all I could see, he had his oxygen mask on, and where his goggles were was nothing but a pool of blood. I got him situated, calmed down, plugged in his heated suit into a new receptacle where I could take care of him. Shortly after working on him, trying to bandage him, he was mumbling something, and I couldn't have to with his oxygen mask on, but I looked and I saw that I had plugged his heated suit into straight voltage. So I was roasting him for a bit, but he never did go into shock. That's what I always claim, my keeping him warm. So I put him on the rheostat and he was calmed down, but didn't know how bad he was until actually we had landed. It was another one of these first-time things that we'd pulled to the head of the formation as we came in for landing at our base in Windling. And I was shooting red flares, which signaled that I had wounded a boat. And that gave us the right to come up and alert the medics that when we hit the ground and got to the end of the runway, we didn't go park the airplane or anything, stopped right there and they took him out. Took him aboard the ambulance. So it was the next day that we really found out what was, how bad he was hurt. And what happened was a piece of flak came through the turret, took his complete eyebrow off, never touched his skull.
Wow.
And after 3 or 4 days, after stitched up and so, he was back with the crew.
Wow, he joined the crew again.
Joined the crew again. We had one mission, I think, without him, but he was a great guy, and I had to be thankful that I wasn't in that turret, because I figured that if it hit him in the head, it was going to hit me somewhere around the neck. So I always thank Bill for taking one for me that didn't kill him.
Wow. How cold did it get inside the airplane, you know?
It could be 30 to 40 below zero.
Really?
You couldn't touch. We had our gloves, the first pair of gloves we put on were nylon or silk, whatever they were. And that was when you had to work on something.
Yeah.
If you touched anywhere on the airplane with metal, you would just like putting your hands on the refrigerator coils
Yeah.
when they're freezing, and you just leave your skin on there. But that was throughout the airplane. So these gloves that we wore on first before we put the heavy ones on.
So the only way that you could stay warm was with these heated flight suits.
Heated flight suits.
Now, so if you go from one part of the airplane to the other, do you have to continually unplug yourself and plug yourself
Plug
back?
it, true.
Oh.
But you know, there wasn't, you know, many times that we would have to go back, anything wrong in the back to take care of. So really, very few times I had to go to the back. But you normally felt like you were warm enough just to make a short distance back there and make a return trip. Or once you got in the back too, you could have, there was a plug-in where you could attach to it.
What altitudes did you typically fly at? And also, how high would flak go up in the sky?
Well, as high as we were going, 20, somewhere around 20 to 25, 25 was about as high as B-24 would go, loaded with gasoline and bombs. And on about other than the Bill Dollar being hit and coming in there with the red flares, we were also coming back one day that we landed, and it was the nose gunner who generally went to the tail section for landing. He was coming back up front after we went down the runway, and he put his hand in the bomb bay to go down on the catwalk, and his voice hollered, "Bomb in the bomb bay!" And that was unusual. Usually it was one of the waist gunners was supposed to check, and evidently he did not see this 500-pound RDX bomb on the last top rack. So we made it to the hod stand where we parked our airplane, and we all jumped out and ran for the nearest ditch. And finally the armorers, ground crew armorers, came up, and they put a couple of mats underneath it, but something like would have on a sofa.
Like a mattress?
But in small pieces, they would put them underneath there, and they just salvoed on the ground. But of course, we didn't know that they had taken out all the guts of the bomb that wouldn't set it off and so forth. And so we wouldn't come out till we were sure that the bomb was safe. But all in all, the 18 or maybe a little bit more missions, they were all very good. We didn't have very few fighter planes, and I think that did more and terrible things to the 8th Air Force was the fighter planes of Germany, and the flak together along with it. We had extra amount of flak, but very few fighters. The German Air Force was just annihilated. Normally there were 3 squadrons, out of 4 squadrons in the group, 3 were flying. And you start off roughly around 12, so about 36 planes in each squad, each group, 36 airplanes. So if you had 3 or 4 groups in your wing, you could have probably 150 airplanes just in your wing. And then there was the other wings that were forming elsewhere. Britain was letting up. We even got shot at by some British anti-aircraft there on missing a misidentity or something. And it was in the dark that we'd be up in the dark trying to form. And each group had a particular colors, and each squadron would have a particular. So you would go to wherever your group was, and then find your squadron at a certain altitude, and you'd fly around in circles more or less till everybody got in, and the forward group started moving out across the channel.
How would you find them in the dark? I mean, was it radio contact or lights? Or?
No, it was mainly the flares that we would shoot out.
Okay.
There was one mission that was late in the missions that we flew, that we lost an engine. So we immediately had got rid of our bombs, and we didn't have a bombardier. A bombardier was only in the lead and deputy leads. The rest of us, as the bombs dropped, first bomb came out of the lead ship, had a smoke stream on it. So as it went, all the nose gunners, we called them toggleiers, they had a switch that they could toggle all our bombs at one time. Wow. So we ended up like, somebody called it blanket bombing, carpet bombing, and so forth. But on the way on one of the last missions, close to the last missions, we lost an engine, so we dropped the bombs. We tried to see if we could hit a road crossing and do some damage somewhere where the mission would be worth it. And so we dropped the bombs, then turned around and started back. And we kept seeing something up in front of us. It had to be miles in front of us. And when we caught up with it, we were leery on whether we wanted to catch up with it or not. But finally, a B-24 running could run much faster than a B-17. So it turned out it was a B-17 with two P-47s escorting it back. And so we pulled up, throttled back, dropped a little flap so that we could stay with the B-17 and his fighter cover. And that was the nearest I got on the way back. We passed over Paris. Oh. I saw Paris from the air. We went about 10,000 feet. We were looking down at the, what was the big tower?
The
Eiffel
Tower?
The Eiffel Tower. We looked down.
Wow.
And on the way back, our B-17, the fighters left him. He was back in friendly territory. So he went off a little bit further north than we did. Our radio operator told us that there were hidden flak guns, the German pockets that were still operating on the Atlantic coast there of France and so forth. So we took a little different direction, and the plane that the B-17, he got shot at quite a bit. Whatever happened to him, we don't know. But we didn't go the same way he was going. And finally, we landed on the west coast of England in a base that was particularly set up with large wide runways and so forth, that airplanes that are injured that you needed to get to them from that side, you would land at this place. And I think this was a mission there. I was watching the fuel gauges, and they were sight gauges. And every time the airplane would take a bump or something, the red bubble would come up on top, and then a little while later, it would go back down to where you couldn't see it. So I had to judge whether we could make it across the channel. Give him the finger crossed and told the pilot, "Yes, sir, we got enough to make it across." Well, we just barely did get across the channel and be able to land at this auxiliary base where we could get refueled to go back to our home.